Welcome everyone to Adam Lowry's Author Spotlight. We are so excited to have him here. We are here to discuss his saga. Oh, here we go. Can you see it? A Shimmering World. So it's a duology, if that's correct. Yes?
There's 2 books out right now. It's going to be four total.
4. Amazing. Okay, so yeah, I suggest that as soon as you get this one, to get the second one, because it does end on a cliffhanger, and now I have to wait till Saturday to see what happens. So when my Amazon shipment comes in. So anyway, let's go ahead and start. I'm gonna just take it over to Adam and tell us a little bit about yourself.
There's not a whole lot about me. I'm from McDonough, Georgia. It's about an hour south of Atlanta. Yeah, I've always liked writing and stories, and I've always been very interested in TV and film, and I worked in TV and film for a little bit. When I went to college, I got my bachelor's in film and video production. I worked in Atlanta in film and video for a little bit. And then I started dating my wife, and her parents, they do property management down in Panama City Beach, and they invited us to come down there and join them. And so we moved down into Florida, and we've been doing property management since 2017 down there. So I started off writing, screenplays and working in, production in Atlanta on films, mostly as like a PA, or sometimes as like a producer for like short, smaller scale short films and things like that. A couple of small features, but mostly short films and things like that. But yes, when I did write screenplays, a couple of my short films got produced, but none of my features have gotten produced yet.
That's awesome. That makes sense, because I was going to say, like, your visuals are amazing. Like, the storytelling is it's very vivid. So I'm assuming the film background helped with that. At what point did you get your master's from press, right? You got it at Harvard Extension School?
Yeah, I'm actually still in Harvard Extension School. I'm working on my master's thesis right now. So I turned that in. My first full draft is due in October. Got us in the last version of it in November. And then in March, I'll graduate. As long, if they give it the okay. If I screwed it up, they'll be like, no, you got to do it again. So
I highly doubt that. That's awesome, though. Okay, yay. And it's in English or in creative writing and literature?
English. Yeah, I thought about doing creative writing literature, but my wife and my mom and dad were like, you should do it in, English, because then you could get a job as an English professor, and if your book stuff does good, you can just get a job as a creative writing professor because your books sold well. I'm like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. So I'll do that.
Okay, good. Well, I mean, I'm sure still, like, in order to, what is it? You have to read like a writer, right? So I'm sure how do you feel like your English master's program has helped you in your writing?
It really makes you examine books in a different way, and not just books, any kind of like media, 'cause it's all the same kind of skills to deconstruct something and kind of you know create a different reading of it. You can always look at something in a different way. So it makes you examine things in a way you might not if you're just a casual writer or reader. Like I always say that when you're first starting to write, you kind of have, because you've lived your whole life watching movies and TV and reading books, maybe not books as much, but just consuming stories. You have kind of a natural inclination towards how a story should unfold. Like, okay, well, I've written a little bit, but now something probably should happen here because I'm getting bored, and you might not know it, but you're hitting structure beats, like just right off, because you've consumed enough media, something needs to happen around here. So whenever you get more into it and you learn structure and learn theory, you can write better, but you still kind of have a natural idea of it. So
Yeah, let's talk more about that, because your structure and your world building are very, very impressive in your book. I there was so much going on, and yet somehow I was able to follow along, which is actually crazy for me because I usually really struggle following along with these really complex narratives. So maybe also tell us a little bit about A Shimmering World and like how to do your world building.
Yeah, the world building is interesting as a like world building as a concept, especially for fantasy and sci-fi. There's a real tendency for some writers to overdo it and to make the story all about their world building. But in my personal opinion, I think world building is best as a background. It's like it fills it out in a way that makes the world feel real without you writing a textbook about the Targaryen dynasty and like 300 years of like we don't need that. At least I don't personally. But yeah, so whenever I was writing the first draft of it, I would be writing and I'd be like, well, they should be making some kind of cultural references here because that will make it feel real. And then I'd write the cultural reference without it meaning anything. I'd be like, oh, back in the Silver Wars, the dwarves were the enemies, but now they're our friends. There's something like that. And after about 100 pages in or so, I'd be like, well, what was that reference I made way back there? What did that mean? And so I kind of went back and like copied all those into a Word document and expanded upon them just for myself, so that I kind of ended up creating a history, like in like a timeline of like these are the kings and queens. This one died here and there. Their most notable accomplishments are this and that, and it was all for me. And then whenever I moved on, I could go back to that document and make more cultural references, and that way it flowed smoothly.
That's amazing. Yeah. Okay. So you did it as you wrote. A lot of people tend to do it like before they write or do the timeline, but I feel like maybe at least for you that really worked in this book because I felt like you're right. Sometimes the story building is like too much. It becomes overwhelming, especially if it's all like an info dump at the beginning. Whereas this one, you kind of just like fed it to me in little pieces and it felt so real. And I think also because your book is just so character rich. Like I wasn't expecting it to be so philosophical and like so much like just internal struggle. And then it's almost like every character had a backstory, but it wasn't just thrown into your face. It was kind of like sprinkled throughout. So it's very digestible. So you kind of that's just how you think, or did you kind of move chapters around also when you edited?
I didn't necessarily move chapters around. When the things I wrote pretty much stayed in the where they were, but I would move character beats around definitely because I have a tendency to be like, I want to do this thing. I'm going to write that now. And then once I have a full draft, I'll read it like 100 times. I'm like, okay, well, this needs to really be further on. Like this romantic subplot is good, but they're kissing too early. Let's move that down here, which always makes my wife very angry. She loves the romance stuff in my books. So she's like, why do you make me wait 50 chapters for them to do whatever? So, but yeah, so it really just depends. I'll write stuff, really just whatever comes to my mind, whatever I think is appropriate for the moment in the chapter and for the characters. And if it needs to move, it moves. But for the most part, as far as like the events of a chapter, that stays relatively the same. Now, I mean, for this first book, I wrote a version of it and I started sending it to publishers and agents. And I decided after the first couple of rejections that I was going to rewrite it. And I did. And I rewrote the book itself. The plot is largely the same, but I redid a bunch of chapters and I kind of retooled some characters. Like Herlen and Merva were not, they weren't married or in a romantic relationship in the original version of the book, which is obviously a huge part of the second part of this book. So, yes, things move around and things change.
That's so cool. Yeah, that's like pivotal in the story now.
Yeah.
So I've often heard people say as they're writing, you have a plan for your characters, and then your characters kind of do what they want. They don't listen to that plan. Is that kind of what happened for you in that instant?
Not in that instance, but there's a really big one in the second book, which I won't spoil, but there was a very pivotal moment for Emiliana in the second book, where something was supposed to happen, and I wrote it that way. And every chapter I write, when I have a draft, I send it to my wife, and my wife will be like, "That's really great," or be like, "You need to change some things." And I sent it to her, and she's like, "Yeah, that wouldn't happen." And I was like, "Yeah, you're right. She wouldn't do that." And then it ended up making me completely like rewrite her that other character in Emiliana's story. Which, if you read the second book, you'll probably know kind of what I'm talking about.
That is so cool. Okay, so basically you have like an in-house editor. So you're saying the key
Yeah,
to success is to marry someone who's going to read your chapter.
yeah. And my wife, I don't know if you saw, but my wife, she's the dedication in the book at the beginning. Where's it at? Right there. It says my wife's name is for Senya. So
That's so sweet. Yeah, tell us a little bit about the inspiration of your story, 'cause it's pretty out there.
yeah, it's pretty out there. Believe it or not, I mean, I know you read it. I don't know if anyone else has looked at it at all. But you might not believe it after reading it, but the original spark of inspiration was The Legend of Korra. Uh, so I don't know if that's the sequel to Avatar: The Last Airbender.
I was in the
That's
States
where I'll,
too, so I didn't know if there was like some Avatar influence.
yeah, it was mostly most of the original stuff, most of the original ideas I got from that show. Didn't really make it into the final product, but that's kind of where I got the 1920s vibe from. You know, the kind of steampunky. I try to play with it a little bit here. It's kind of a Aston Forth is a kingdom that's in transition. They're kind of a monarchy, kind of a democracy, but not really. They're steampunky, but they're also kind of diesel punky. It's all changing. So that was the original idea, or not the original idea, but the original inspiration for it, and it kept changing as things went on. I had the original idea in 2011, which is when I graduated high school. I graduated high school in 2011. I started not really writing it, but kind of doing world building and stuff around that time. And then right before I moved to Panama City Beach, so 2016, 2017, I looked back at the old documents, and I was like, this is after I'd written a bunch of screenplays and stuff. And I was like, I think this is actually, there's something good here. And I worked on it, and I changed it a lot and expanded it. And eventually, I think in like 2019, I had a full draft, and it came out. I think the first book published came out in 2021, I think.
It says 2022.
Yeah, so that's this version of it. The first one, actually, I got it right here. This is the first draft that came out this was published by a publishing company in North Carolina, I think, maybe South Carolina, and it's a little different layout and everything, different cover, but that's the first version that was published. It was a small publishing house, but they ended up going out of business not long after. I think at the end of that year, actually. It had just kind of started up. They had published maybe 8 to 10 books, and I was like one of the first ones to sign on that they bought. But the pandemic kind of just wiped them out.
Wow. Okay. So then how did you switch to a new publisher? What happens?
So whenever I signed on, I was like, hey, this is a series, and I don't really, I mean, I like money. Obviously, I need money to live, but I don't care about money that much. I was like, so what I really want is if I need to be able to get my rights back if something happens, or if you don't like the second book or the third book, I want to be able to finish this. So like came out in I think January of 2021, and I think by like November they're like, yeah, we're closing shop. The only they told me that the only part of their business that was profitable at the time was the literature magazine, and that they had plans to restructure and bring the literature magazine back, but they were closing down their book publishing side because it just didn't make any money. So they gave me my last check, and they returned the rights to me. I didn't have to pay anything because I had it in my contract that I would get it back. And then I self-published the book right after that on Amazon. And I think a couple months later, maybe, was it 2023? I think I published the second book.
The second
I'm not
copy?
sure. No, the second book, Only the
Oh.
Monsters. I think that's 2023. I could be wrong. This is 2024, so that would be this year. Yeah.
Oh, hey.
So that would have been, yeah. Sorry, time is like
I know.
crazy to me.
2030. Like that's crazy. So you kind of went through like a whole publishing disaster, I guess, in a way. But
Well, it wasn't, I don't know. I learned a lot from it, so I don't regret anything about it. But yeah, it didn't turn out the way I would have hoped. But you know, I still feel like I learned a lot, and I got to put my book out there, and it's done pretty well as far as like you know, books being put out by a small publisher or even a self-publisher. It's sold a decent bit of copies, and it continues to sell like pretty well. Like not like amazing, but it sells consistently, which is not like I don't want to say rare, but I think most books, even like traditionally published books, they usually sell like less than 400 or 500 copies, I think.
wow. And you've sold more than that?
Yeah, I think between the two books, I want to say I've sold at least 1,000, 1,500.
That's amazing. How awesome. Congrats. That's
Thanks.
so
Yeah, I think I usually make a sale or two a day, something like that. Like it's pretty consistent. Sometimes there's a drop off, and it'll be like nothing for a few days, and then like you know 2 or 3, and then nothing. But usually about 1 or 2 a day.
that's so exciting. So tell us about how your self-publishing experience was. Like how was the transition?
Mm. Well, self-publishing is interesting because so previously I had a publisher, and that they do everything for you. They will take your manuscript, they'll get an editor, they'll fix all your grammar. You know, if you go through like, hey, you know, in chapter 2 you say he has green eyes, but in chapter 43 you said they're brown. They'll fix that. For example, a small thing in the first book, and since you've read it, you'll know what I'm talking about. In the chapter before they leave, when Em goes to see her mom, the Duke is there. In the draft I submitted to the publisher, that wasn't the Duke, it was Herlen. So when the Duke shows up back in the end of the book, they're like, well, that kind of feels a little out of left field. Why don't we, you know, put him a little, you know, bring him up again a little earlier? So I was like, that's a good idea. I'll change it to the Duke instead of Herlen, kind of, you know, kind of tie that knot a little closer. So they'll do stuff like that. And they'll market it for you. They'll do a cover. They'll hire a cover artist. All that stuff for you. So that's nice. They even had me go to like a couple small like local bookstores and stuff, and be like, hey, this is my book. When you're on your own, self-publishing, you got to do all of that. So you have to hide. If you can edit, then you'll save yourself a lot of money because an editor is expensive, and you have to do your own cover art or hire somebody. You have to market it yourself. You have to format it yourself. Everything. Formatting is not that bad if you have a professional software. I use Vellum, and that's kind of like an industry standard software. And you can get it, and you can do as many books as you want for life for $200. It's not like Adobe where it's like a monthly thing. You buy it's one purchase and you're done. But yeah, so for the second book, so the first book came out, and this front cover was actually originally the back cover of the first book. It's kind of tinted, so you can't really see it. But then this is a drawing of Relkin, the main city, that I did. So that's what they used as the cover. So for the first book, I just used that back cover as the front cover because I thought it looked cool and kind of minimal, but still good. And then for the second book, I drew this as my front cover, but I decided that what I wanted to do as a self-publisher, I wanted to try to act like I was a real publisher and just go through everything, hire people, and see what I can do. So I hired a cover artist, and we were working on a cover, and it was going to be $600 for the cover. He was going to do all of it. It was coming out very nicely, and then after about 2 or 3 months, I stopped hearing from him, and I hired him from a website. So I went to the website, and I was like, "Hey, I haven't heard from this guy in a while," and they reached out to him, and they couldn't get in touch with him either. And then after about another month, they came back to me like, "So we talked to him. He's in the hospital. He got COVID really, really badly, and he can't finish your project. So because he did do a lot of work, but he can't deliver a finished product. So we'll give you an amount back." So I got maybe half back, but I didn't get anything I could use. So I ended up I was like, I'll just draw it. So I drew this, and that's this cover. So that's the kind of thing, if you're self-publishing, that kind of thing can happen, you know?
My jaw is literally like permanently dropped. Okay, so you just happen to also be a really talented artist, then you'll be fine. But if not, you're kind of screwed.
Well, it depends. Make sure that you have room in your timeline for those kind of events. Because if you're self-publishing and like, okay, I want this to come out in January, and if you hire somebody in December and they give for a month before the release, and then that happens, okay, well, yeah, now you got to do it. But I mean, I've always liked drawing, so I mean, I'm pretty good at drawing. I don't want to say I'm like the most amazing ever. Obviously, I'm not, but I think that I'm okay. But I wanted to try to see what like a real fantasy artist would do. And this guy was really good. He's really professional. He works for like video game studios. Like he worked on like World of Warcraft and things like that. So he was really good at fantasy and sci-fi and things like that. So I was bummed that I didn't get to see his finished cover because it was looking good.
That's such a bummer, but also a very, good way to learn through experience. Also, how's our guy? Do you know if he's okay? Like,
I never tried to reach out to him after that, but I have Googled his name since then just to make sure that there weren't like any obituaries or anything. So I think he's doing okay because I haven't seen anything like that. So I think he's recovered, but I do know that he was in the hospital for an extended period of time.
wow. Yeah, I mean, you just happen to be publishing on top of a pandemic, so that's a completely unique experience that you
Yeah.
handled really well. So as a self-publisher, you mentioned a deadline. Like, how are those like deadlines that you set for yourself, or is it like something that you have to absolutely follow through with?
So if you're doing it yourself, you don't have to do anything. It's all up to you. So if I wanted to move the deadline back, I could. Now there's research and just general trends that show when the best kind of deadline, or not deadline, the release window to release a book is, and it's usually like right after the holidays, like January, the end of December, things like that. I think also like February, like between the end of December to February is like the time people buy like the most books. So I was trying to hit that. But also the reason I mostly wanted to get it out because with the way everything happened, I not that version. When this version came out, like the day it came out, I already was done with this. And I was talking to the publisher, and we were going through it, and he was in the process of like hiring and like a cover artist and everything, and an editor to get to go through with it. And then before it could come out, the company went down. So I was like, well, I want to get this out, but I also don't want to do it, halfway. I want to make it good, and I want to make sure that it's high quality. So you know, I had to kind of learn everything real quickly, but that's just how it goes.
That's amazing. You're a natural improviser. And I'm sure like being in the industry has helped too, which going back to that, do you have any plans of maybe turning this? I mean, it would be really long, but like turning this into a screenplay and making it like a show or a movie series?
Uh, I mean, I would love to. I don't have any plans right now to, but if I was ever approached or if I, had the ability to pitch it to somebody, I would jump on that because I think personally, I tend to think that if you're doing a sci-fi show or a fantasy show, uh, 9 times out of 10 it should be animated. But I really love animated shows, animation in general. Uh, so I would want an animated show. I know it kind of like limits how big it can be. Like you're never going to be a Game of Thrones if you have an animated TV show. But I don't that that's not my main concern. If I could like something like Castlevania or even art like Arcane, those kind of styles, I think that would fit this pretty well. And I mean I would like so if there was an opportunity to do something like that, I would jump on that. But it really just depends on what could happen. Like I have a lot of friends in Atlanta, and I have a lot of friends that do high profile work. Like actually, I have two friends that I don't know if you guys saw it, but there was the President Biden interview with Complex. They both worked on that. They shot that for the White House, oh, not for the White House, but for Complex. So they, pretty high profile work. So one of those guys that I am friends with, we've been working on a screenplay together for a while, and if ever came time to to sell that or to pitch that, maybe I could work this in there. But that would be that's in the future.
That's incredible. That's so exciting. Yeah, I could absolutely see this like as a show or whatever, anywhere on TV. I could absolutely see it. I personally probably could not stomach it because I can read some gore, but to watch it, like I physically get sick. But I do think that it would be so popular and rich. And because you are independent, you would get full rights. Am I correct in assuming
Yeah,
that?
I would get full rights, and I would get more money off of it. So, I mean, that's kind of a trade off. If you work with a big publisher, you're more likely to make more sales and make more money. But in when it comes to things like movie rights, they get the majority of that chunk. But if you're a self-publisher and someone wants to make a movie out of your book, you get all of it because you own everything. So that's a potential benefit. It doesn't mean you're gonna have a movie made.
Yeah, it's not guaranteed, but if you're already thinking that, hey, whatever you're writing could be a good manuscript or a screenplay, or it could be a good movie, then that might be something you want to think about. Um, and is it possible at all, at least in your experience, to get like you said, most of the rights through a publisher? Did you like discuss any like when you had a publisher for the first book? How hard was it to kind of get what you wanted on the contract?
So it was a pretty standard contract. Like I had there was an advance, and then there was like I got a percentage of every sale. And then I would, they own it, it's pretty standard. So they would own the rights to the book and the series. And if there was any kind of, interest in making a TV show or a movie or anything like that, they would get, I don't know, 70% of it. And then I'd get like 30. But I mean, it's not necessarily a one-time thing. You get, royalties and residuals and everything. So it's more money than you probably would think. But yeah, it just depends. It just also depends on, the company that you sign with. Mine was very small. They just started out and they were, kind of aggressively signing people. Um, so yeah, I think it was like I remember sending it to a friend of mine who does. He's not a lawyer, but he's like really into law. and I can generally trust his opinions. And he was like, yeah, this is a pretty standard contract. So I was like, okay, cool.
That's awesome. Yeah, I figured it'd be nice to like kind of have a few eyes on it. That's so cool
Yeah,
that
yeah.
you're sharing like this experience with us. It's so exciting. I
Yeah, of
also want to
course.
say to everyone watching, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat as we speak, but we will have some time for questions at the end. Right now, I'm just really picking your brain because I'm like, one, I'm a big fan, but two, it's also very cool and exciting to hear, you know, your personal experience as a HES graduate, as a fellow, you know, classmate, or not graduate, but, you know, almost done. You're almost there.
Almost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so also I was going to say, do you have any experience or plans of writing any other genres, or is it mainly like fantasy sci-fi?
Mainly fantasy sci-fi. I would love to do something. I would love to do something more in like the literature side eventually. I just tend to I always go, so for example, I go through these phases with my own personal reading. Like, so I don't know if everybody else follows like book talk, which if you don't know what that is, it's the side of TikTok where people talk about books and like and I got really into book talk a couple of years ago, and they were all like, I've read 12 books this month. I've read 8 books this month. And I was like, I gotta get to that level. And so I got to a point where I was reading like 7 or 8 books a month, easy, no problem. And I eventually realized like I'm reading a lot of really mediocre books. And this might just be because I'm just picking random books. Or I'm not like, I have a tendency to just, oh, iBooks recommended me this. That looks pretty good. I'll read that. Uh, but I had a tendency to be like, okay, I want to slow down a little bit, and I want to read better books, like more like less books, but better books. So I'll read a bunch of sci-fi and fantasy, and then eventually I'll read like a literature book. But it takes me forever to get through the literature book. I'll read 400 pages a day of like Red Rising, but then I'll read. I'm reading The Savage Detectives, and it's great. It's a really well written literature book, amazing. It's the same author as my one of my favorites of all time. It's 2666. It's Roberto Bolano. I think that's how you say his name. Latin American author. Fantastic. But like that book took me like a year to get through. Like I can read 8 sci-fi fantasy books at a time, but literature just takes me a while to get through. So yeah, I love writing fantasy. I love writing sci-fi, and I can go into that. But if I do literature, I'm like, well, wouldn't this be cooler if there was a dragon or something? Wouldn't that be more interesting right now? So eventually.
I love that. That's great. Yeah, I actually I've been getting pickier about what I read too, because it takes a lot of time to read, right? Even like the stuff that you can do devour. Like I straight up when I started reading your book, I like was like into it, whatever. And then I looked at the time, like 5 hours had passed, and it was like midnight, and I had to like teach the next morning at 6. And I was like, I need to stop, but I can't. But I I really had to force myself to stop because it's especially with like the dragons and the constant action. And then especially this book, like you do such a good job of having a balance of action, but also like characterization. That's what, and interiority. So it's kind of like it's constantly like moving. And I noticed that the end of every chapter, you kind of left us with this little feeling of like wanting to keep reading. And I think that is like the biggest takeaway I got from your book is like, I want to do that. Like at the end of every chapter, leave a little Easter egg where you don't want to stop. And then at the beginning of every chapter, it catches your attention. So I was curious, I was like, how long did it take you to write this? Because this is so good.
I So that was a later edition when I decided to rewrite the book. I originally had these long chapters, so every chapter that you see now was pretty much cut in half. And so most of these chapters were one big chapter. And then I started reading, like I said, I started reading a lot because I was like, I need to be like that and read 10 books a month. And I started reading a lot, and I noticed that a lot of these newer books that were coming out, they had these really tiny, short chapters. And the one that sold me the most on doing it was, I don't know if anyone's read this. It's really more of a young adult kind of thing, but it's the Inheritance Games. I don't know if you've heard that. It's a very fun series. It's probably mostly aimed at like middle school girls, but I enjoyed it as well. And basically, the plot pitch is that there's a girl. I think she's in middle school or high school, and like the richest man in the world dies, and he names her as like the inheritance in his will, so she gets everything. And the only like stipulation is that she has to live in his mansion with his family for like a year, and she can't leave, so she has to deal with that. Anyway, it's fun, but every chapter is like a portion of a chapter, and it makes you want to keep reading because you're like, well, that wasn't satisfying. I need to keep going to figure out what's going on. And so I was like, I'm going to incorporate that, and I cut all my chapters kind of in half to where I thought they should be. And I was like, anytime there's a beat, I'm going to cut it there, and then it'll continue on, and then you got to keep reading to kind of get that conclusion.
Yes, that's exactly what I felt, and that's what I'm trying to emulate too. And that's another thing to keep in mind as we're revising and editing is that the world's attention span is getting shorter and shorter. People want to be able to stop after reading 6 pages. They don't want to have to wait 30 pages to find a good stopping point. But also, if you leave that stopping point like just really juicy, you're like, okay, I'll read another chapter. It's short. Because I would do that. I was like, oh, I have to go do something. And then I would look, how long is the next chapter? I was like, it's only 6 pages. I can do it. I can do it. And then that's sucked in. And then because it leaves on suspense, like I find myself doing like errands or whatever, and I'm thinking about the characters. I'm like fully invested, and I'm like trying to find a time in my schedule to read another chapter because it's easier to fit in. It's like a hit workout, you can just get it in really quick. And then, and when you were saying kind of like chopping them up, I think of those when okay, at least this happens to me when I'm craving dessert, but I'm trying to watch my calories or whatever. You get like those like mini Chips Ahoy, and so they're mini, and so you're like, okay, I'll just have like a few, but then like 6 of them equals 1 cookie, and then I have 20 mini ones, and I'm like, did I really just so it kind of that feeling of just not being able to stop. It's addicting. It's like the do you want to continue watching on Netflix thing. So it's really, really well done. I wanted you to commend you for that.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. We are getting some questions in the chat, which is so exciting. I also wanted to play a little game with you here because
Okay.
I thought it would be fun, and I thought it would be a good way for our viewers to get a little mini Chips Ahoy cookies of your book. And I wanted to play a game that I made up called How Well Do You Know Your Characters? So the author, I'm going to read a quote that I really liked that was said by a character, and you're going to tell us who said it.
Okay.
Okay. So this first one is from the first book. History is a book of blood written by the man with the quickest bullet.
That's Herlen.
Oh, look at that. Quick. Yeah, I love that. Like you had a lot of like philosophical things sprinkled in there that really made me stop and like write it down and think, like, what does he mean by this, and apply it to my life. And I love those like little Easter eggs you gave us. Okay.
Yeah, I really like it when I really like it when characters, like, I don't know if anyone ever has watched this YouTube channel. I haven't seen them in my recommended in a long time, but it was Wisecrack. And they would always do like the philosophy of Darth Vader. They'd take the character, and then they'd be like, this is the corresponding like philosopher that this kind of ties into. I'm like, that's great. I wanted that with my book. I want someone to be able to like take my character and then do that. And I'm like, that's what I want. So I kind of try to intentionally do stuff like that.
Yeah, and it worked, and it also makes the character feel so real. And like it goes back to everything they teach us in class or in the creative writing courses is you should be able to know who your character is and what they would do, and your reader should be able to read something they say and be like, oh, that's M, without even having to see the tag for it. And so that's something I'm playing with, and I found that because everyone was so in tune with their own every character was so in tune with their own philosophical notions, it was pretty easy to tell who would say that. But then be careful, because if you do that too well, then your reader will be like, bullshit. They would, oh, can I say be? We're recording this.
I mean, I don't care. I'm sure you. I mean,
but yes, your character would not say it. Oh my god. Okay.
my characters say some bad words, so it's okay.
Yeah, they do. You're right. You're right. This is for an adult audience. We'll make sure to put that disclaimer at the top. Parental guidance required. Yes, exactly. Exactly. I love it. All right. I'm just gonna keep going until people put more questions in here. Okay. Also, these are really great quotes. Oh, okay. Here's one. Stupid is a very good thing to be. No one ever suspects the stupid. I got an incoming call. No one ever suspects the stupid of deliberate acts.
That's Oles.
Yes.
Mhm.
Which, okay, when you guys read this, your mind is gonna be blown. There's a character. He's a supporting minor character, I would say. Well, he's in the large scheme of things, he's a really important character, but he only gets like 2 chapters. And in those 2 chapters, I knew this character so well. And it wasn't like an info dump. It was just like 12 pages total of this character. And I felt like I knew him. And I was just like mind blown. And it's things like that, quotes that just sit with you that really get to know, it really gets you to know the character without saying like, this is what the character thinks, and so I really, really like that. Okay, so enough of my voice. I would love to hear, Brian, if you would like to read your question, or if not, then I can read it for you. But if you can, Brian had a great question in.
Sure. I can speak to mine. So earlier, the two of you were talking about world building style and how a lot of people really like to spend a lot of time fleshing out the backstory and the timelines of their worlds, but how you kind of did yours by dropping offhand references and then going back and fleshing them out. Was that just kind of the natural way that you write, or was that kind of a learned thing that you knew you had to do because it can be a bit of a trap to spend all your time world building instead of working on your book?
Yeah, it's a great question. And in all honesty, that's just how I write. I think everybody is going to write, or at least when they start writing, they're going to kind of naturally go towards whatever they're interested in. And I'm interested in plot and characters. Like, so if I read a book or if I'm writing a book, I want to know what I want good characters doing something interesting or having something interesting done to them that they have to react to. So like I'm in a lot of like Facebook and Reddit groups for writers and things like that. And almost every post is always like, what do you think about my world building? What do you think about my magic system? And like, I don't care about those things. Tell me about your characters. What are your characters doing and what is your plot? Because those things are great and they're fun, but they are there to fill out the background and make things like feel more real and to, help things along. Like, I don't know, everybody's different, but I've never walked out of a movie or, finished a book and been like, that world building was so interesting. I'm always like, Herlen is such a cool character. Like the plot was great. I never saw the plot twist coming. So for me, it's just that's what I'm interested in, and so that's how I wrote it. But I also
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say I totally understand, and especially now it feels like because we are inundated with so much media, and every media has its own universe, that at a certain point, unless it's a really exceptional universe, it just kind of fades into the background.
Yeah, totally. And like that's another thing is like there was the news the other day that HBO has 7 Game of Thrones spinoffs in the works. I'm like, I don't need that. There's a million amazing fantasy and sci-fi books out there. Adapt one of those. I've had enough of this. Like it's good, but I've had enough of it. So yeah, I think that when it comes to like feeling like you're not contributing to your own work, as long as you're building out the world in a way that can be included into your story, I think that you're making progress. Like if you're just like if you're writing a textbook, you know, like a full-on book that could come out like Fire and Blood, for example, I think that's probably a waste of time. But if you're doing bullet points and stuff that you can include into your book and be like make those references, like I was talking about earlier, I think that's progress. As long as you are going to include it, and honestly, even if you don't end up making it into the final draft, it's still work. It's still helping you come down to write. So
I love that. Thank you, Brian, for that question. And I will add too, just from reading your book, I think what really helped me with the world building, or what got me excited about your world building, is that your world felt like a character. Like every monster had its own thing. Every like location, you know, had a personality. Like every world, city, everything had its own character. And that's why I was excited about the places, and it was easier to follow for me because like what Selena said is I also prefer character driven things, especially when it's so complex. Like guys, I cannot tell you, this is so complex for me. Like I love reading things I could never write. I could never come up with this. It's like there's like so many different worlds within one world, and there's a map in here too, and I could not follow that map. Did you draw that, by the way?
yeah, I drew the map.
Amazing.
It's this is the map. It's kind of hard to see, but and that tiny little bit, you can't, it's funny because the main part of the map ends up being right like where the fold is. That tiny little part is the main like that's where all of the stuff happens, like in that little country. The rest is just kind of like so you know what we're talking about.
That's so funny. Of course, that would happen. But yeah, watch out. I think you might be getting some of us sending you an email asking you to draw our maps for us and our art.
Oh, I'm happy to do that. I'm actually working like it's slow going because there's so many chapters, but I'm trying to do an illustrated edition where I do a little photo, like a little picture for every chapter. So I've been doing a couple, like I can show you a couple real quick on my iPad. But sorry, I know I'm just actually, you know what? It's dead.
No. Yeah, okay, we're gonna have to have a what is it, like an artist spotlight part 2 with Adam so we can see your drawing. That is so cool. Wow. Are you planning on doing it in color or just like stencils kind of?
So I took a class here at Harvard Extension it was a graphic novel class, and as part of our, you know, part of it we had to like learn about color and what different. That's the wrong cord to charge my iPad. As part of it, we had to learn about color and everything and color schemes for comics. So, and as our final, we got to draw a comic, a graphic novel. So I did that, and I want to publish that as well whenever I finish it. But so because of that, I stuck with a kind of like grayscale, it's like you know, a light gray, a dark gray, things like that. So that's the kind of the same kind of scale that I stuck to for these images.
That is so cool. My mind is like blown right now. What can't you do?
I don't know. That's a good question. I'm a good cook too.
Too. It's like I'm also going to be the star actor. I'm going to be the prince when the movie comes out.
No, I'm not doing that.
Okay, so we have another question in the chat. He's in a loud place, so I'll read it for him. It says, do you have any tips for first-time novel writers and the outlining process?
Yeah, I think for me personally, that's a really hard, not a really hard question, but it's a really hard thing to give advice about because I hate outlining with a passion. I hate it. I have personally found, like, I know the very first, so I've taken a bunch of screenwriting classes, and because that's where I started out, and I think that's one of the reasons why I can make things, flow, because I know, I know by heart like 3 act structure, and then there's 7 act structure if you want to expand it out, and there's all these different things you can do, and I know exactly when I need to hit this beat. But I remember that very first class I took, they were like, we want character outlines, and we want a plot outline of the whole book, and you got to hit the 3 act structure. And for screenplays, if you don't know, 3 act structure is pretty strict, especially it's so fucking 90 page script, which is average. So like 15 pages in, that's like your inciting incident, and then 30 pages for your act one, 60 for your mid part, and then your climax at like, I'm sorry, not 90 pages, 120, and 90 for your climax, and then the rest is the following action, and you kind of finish up. And I was like, I can't do that. I was like, I can't do that. That's not how I work. I need to write the whole thing and then redo it 100 times in order to figure out what I wanted to do. So that's how I work. And so outlines kill me, because I'm like, well, now that I know what's going to happen, I want to write the interesting parts. I don't want to write the boring stuff. So I'm like, I just want to write those big plot points, and then I don't ever want to do the in between stuff. So I gotta start off and hit everything in the way that I want to hit it. I've gotten better with it recently. Once I decided to make this like a 4-part series, I kind of outlined the whole thing, the whole series, because I know the ending of the series. I know where every major character ends up and things like that. But as far as like outlining an individual novel, I think it really depends on you. I can't really do that. There's a lot of really great resources online that will show you really good outline ideas and like beats to hit, but personally, it doesn't work for me.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah, I imagine once you have 4 books that are each at least 400 pages, you might need an outline to keep organized. Yeah. That's incredible. When you started writing, did you imagine that it would be that many pages? Because I mean, typically fantasy books are long, but
yeah, no, I didn't have any kind of page limit, or I wasn't trying to hit anything. And actually, it being this long is actually a hindrance as far as like getting published. So if anyone is interested in writing fantasy or sci-fi, and you want to get published in a traditional, from a traditional publishing house, they generally, from people who are unknown authors, they don't like anything over like 300, 350 pages. And now, obviously, if we're talking about a professional setting, you don't go off page number, you go off word count. I think, if I remember correctly, I think this is like 250,000 words, something like that, which comes out to what, 400 and like, 440 actually exactly pages. So, it really depends on who you get, and if you have an agent, it makes it easier because they'll vouch for you and they'll take care of all that. I mean, if we want to go into like how publishing works, and then we can do that. But if it's too long, a lot of people just be like, I'm not even interested in that, because sometimes big fantasy books do sell, but that's usually like a Brandon Sanderson, George R.R. Martin kind of thing. It's not always like if you pick up a 600-page book from somebody you've ever heard of, unless it has like amazing reviews, most people are not going to buy it. So
yeah,
at least that's the thinking. So
that's actually a really good tip, especially after going to the writer's residency. Yeah, they said they want like 100,000 for fantasy. They want like 60 to 80,000 for YA. So I feel like maybe it's the attention span. Maybe people just don't want to read that many pages. But like, sometimes you read a book and you're like, dude, this could have been told in like half the amount of pages. But like with yours, I wouldn't know what to cut out, honestly. Like I didn't like there was a part where anything lagged. So that is also a pro of self-publishing. So other things to keep in mind. It's awesome.
Yeah.
And then I think, Aaron, would you like to read yours out loud? Can you?
Sure, yeah. So you mentioned you needed to do your own marketing. Do you have any tips? And how do you acquire most of those sales? Because you say they kind of trickle in. And any advice for dealing with Amazon?
Yeah, so I'll say this first and foremost. I am a creative, so if I have to deal with a form, I lose it. My brain shuts down. I'm not good with that. So when it comes to marketing, I'm not really that good at it. The guy I know one of the guys from the publishing company, and he gives me tips, and he's really, that's his thing. That's what he likes to do. And so everything that I've done is just based off what he said, and he's told me that if you're going to self-publish and you're going to do marketing, or if you're going to be working for a traditional publishing house and you're going to be in charge of marketing, you do Instagram and you do Facebook, anything, and also TikTok. Now that TikTok's like a big thing, everything else is basically not worth your time or money because you do pay for all your ads. You can also do Amazon ads, and those do help on Amazon. But he said TikTok and Facebook, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, those are your big ones. Personally, I do Facebook and Instagram ads every now and then, but probably 90% of my ads come from a service called Pubby. I don't know if anyone's heard about that. Pubby is a service where it's a monthly fee, and it's like $10 a month. And you put your book up, and what it is, it's like an internal ecosystem. And so it's like I read a book, and for reading that book, I think they call it snaps, like 2,000 snaps. And then by posting the review and buying their book, I can put my book up for review, and somebody will grab that book, and then they'll buy my book, and then they'll review it, and then I'll buy somebody else's book and review it. And it's just an internal thing. So I like to read a lot anyway. So I keep my book pretty cheap for an ebook. It's $2.99. So every time that I go through and I read somebody else's book and then I put mine up for review, I'll make a sale. So it just keeps going, and I think I have to make like 2 or 3 sales to make that monthly feedback. So it's there are more efficient ways to do it, but that way, Garrett, if you do Pubby, it guarantees you a review. People have to leave a review. That's the thing. What do you call it? Not the better it looks, but Amazon starts kind of promoting it on its own and pushing it into the ecosystem and things like that. So like on this when this one came out, it had like 80 or 90 reviews, and then the publishing company went down, and I had to do it all over again. But this one, actually today, it just hit 200 reviews, and this one is at like 120. So if you do Pubby, that's a good way to do it. It is a lot of work because it's not like a thing. You can't just buy a review. You have to read the other books and leave reviews, and it's a commitment. But if you like to read, it's a good thing to do. And also you can support other authors. And also you don't have to be an author to sign up for Pubby. You can just sign up as a reader and read these other books. So
that's an incredible way to get, trigger the algorithm for your book, but also give back to the community. And then at the same time, see what's out there, see what's publishing, and just read, because we all love to read. We're bookworms. That is an incredible tip. Thank you so much for that. And thank you for that question, Aaron.
Oh, sorry. The last part, because I forgot about dealing with Amazon. I'll tell you this. My first book, when I put it back up, I wanted it to be everywhere. So I put it on iTunes, not iTunes, well, iBooks, but you got to go through iTunes to do it. I put it up on Ingram Spark, which is how, so for example, if you want your book to be in bookstores and like Target and Walmart, you put it on Ingram Spark, and then they can order it through Ingram Spark, and it'll show up in bookstores and things like that. But you have to kind of contact those stores and to kind of get it rolling, because otherwise it'll just sit on Ingram Spark and no one will buy it. So I did all of that, and obviously I haven't promoted it as much as I should, because marketing and stuff doesn't come natural to me, and I have kind of a lot of other stuff going on too. So I haven't done as much as I should do with that, but you can do all that. I will say that in my experience, Amazon is the easiest to work with. The as far as like at the website and how it interacts with you and how easy it is to use, it's the best of all the other ones. And yeah. Do you have any other like specific things about Amazon specifically, or?
I actually you should reshare that tip that you gave at the writing thing about getting the copy from Amazon. I think everybody would like that.
Oh yeah. So if you have an Amazon account, you can create an Amazon author account. Uh, it's KDP, Kindle Direct Publishing. And if you have a book, it doesn't have to be finished, it can be whatever you want. You can upload your manuscript, upload a cover and everything like that. And then you can go through the publishing process. And at the end, instead of hitting publish, hit request proof copy. And it'll charge you the cost of printing the book. So for example, my book here, these cost me about $5 to print. So whenever I go to like an event, I'll buy like 20 of them. Then I'll sell them for like 20 bucks a piece or something, or 15 bucks a piece, depending. And they'll cost me $5 each. So if you have a book, it's 200 pages, it might cost you $3 to print. And then they'll deliver it to your door. And now the only thing is it'll say, a little band right across, it'll say proof copy, not for resale. But you'll have a printed copy of your book. And then all you gotta do is pay the print price.
It's incredible. Oh my gosh, all these insider tips. And our very own past classmate, like how exciting. That's so great. We are over time, so I want to be respectful of your time, Adam. So if there's any last minute quick questions that anyone has for Adam before we let him go, say it now, forever hold your peace. Yeah. I think we've milked a lot from you already. But yeah, so
that's fine. I mean, I like talking about this. It's a lot of fun for me, especially if I can talk about my book, because I even if you make you can make a decent bit of sales, not unless you talk to somebody one-on-one after they've read the book. You don't get to enjoy it really. It's different. It feels disconnected. So
yeah, that's very true. Yeah.
Oh, you know what? I'll add. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I would add one more thing. If you do self-publish, nobody likes getting bad reviews, obviously. But if you only have good reviews, it looks bad. People will think that that you're botting, or that you're paying for good reviews. So even if you don't want to get a bad review, having one or two at minimum is actually a good thing for you. Like I don't know. I think it was on the other previous one, but I do have at least one or two star reviews on they didn't leave a review, but they left like the rating, and like it hurts. It does hurt you, but like it's good to have those. So it makes you look real. Like some people are actually reading the book and not just, buying it, leaving a 5-star review.
Wow, that's actually a really good tip too, especially like it might hurt your ego, but just remember it's good for business. So if you get a bad review,
yeah.
Maybe even ask your friends, hey, can you leave me a 1-star review, please?
Yeah.
That's really cool. Wow. Okay. So you're saying I should leave you a 1-star review, or no, you have enough now?
Yeah. Yeah. No, just tear me apart, please.
Oh my gosh. Wow. This has been so insightful and really exciting. And I hope you are all excited to read Adam's books. Do we have an idea about when your third one is coming out?
It's been slow going with the third one. I know what I'm gotta write, but and this is like another thing. Like I've been in so my master's thesis mindset that I always feel like if I start creative writing again, I'll be out of my academic mindset, which is why I like the Friday generative writing stuff, because I'm like, okay, I can actually write something, and I can just kind of focus on that. So it's hard for me to switch modes, because I'm thinking like I got to think about my cannibalism in manga. If I don't think about that, then I'm not gonna be able to write it. So
That's such a fair point. And also, thank you for the shameless plug-in for our TGIF every Friday night. Come join us, 8 to 10 Eastern Standard. Yeah, that's awesome. All right, I do want to let you go though, because you've been giving us so much of your time. Thank
that's
you,
fine.
everyone.
I was just gonna throw it out there that if anybody has questions about like Amazon or self-publishing or anything like that, if you want to reach out to me, feel free. You can. I don't mind talking about it. So or answering questions.
That's amazing. Thank you. What would be the best
Mhm.
way for people to reach you?
So I'm on the WhatsApp group.
Okay.
I don't know if you can find me that way, but also I can give you my email. That's fine. So whatever people really prefer.
Okay, awesome. Or maybe we'll have to do another spotlight series and be like Adam and Amazon, Adam versus Amazon.
Yeah, I mean whatever would be most helpful. So
That's incredible. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time and your just generosity. You've been so awesome. And I'm really excited for the second book to come on Saturday.
yeah, I'm very excited to hear what you think about it. I don't know, there's a lot of stuff in the second book that I've always wanted to hear what people who like the first book think about the second book. So there's a lot that goes on in that one.
Oh my gosh. Are you gonna leave me in suspense again? It's gonna be bad, isn't it?
It's gonna be bad, yeah.
Oh my gosh. Maybe I should wait then. No, I'm kidding. I can't wait. It's too late.
You have to wait probably a year, at least a year or more.
But if I come to the write-ins, I'll get some spoilers.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
I love it. That's awesome. All right. Yeah, okay. I guess that's the end of it. Oh, thank you so much, everyone, for coming, and thank you, Adam, for your time. And we will
Mhm.
see you soon at the next one.